Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so excited to bring on our really good friend, Mark Davis. He's the owner of the Boston Martial Arts Center. He is, if you know Mr. Dennis Mahoney, one of our Shihan Kai members, this gentleman, Mark Davis, is his teacher, and we are pleased to introduce you to Mark Davis from Boston, Massachusetts. Mark, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing fine. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You guys look great.
You look fantastic as well. So you just now, Mr. Davis, you just finished up some Zoom classes yourself at your place, right?
Yes. Yes.
So how has, tell us, before we get into your history, since we're kind of doing this Zoom thing and we had a couple technical difficulties with the storms that I'm experiencing in Florida, but when did things start to shift for you, and how did you adapt to the parameters that we kind of had to change to as it relates to teaching martial arts and keeping your place open? How did that change for you?
Well, you know, at first, obviously, all of us were very concerned about the virus that is going around the entire planet. So I had to really think about it in those terms. And one of the students had mentioned this Zoom thing. We'd already been doing Skype trainings for people around the world, actually. And I thought it was a great opportunity to be able to expand our reach and really work with more people than what we normally do. And people who don't come into the dojo often, or people who travel to the dojo, maybe they can't make it in every day, these types of things. So in a way, it was kind of an interesting blessing, not the COVID, but the situation really opened things up, because it really forced us to think about the bigger picture and how we can fit into that, rather than this very small way of looking at the world. And very ninja-like, you know, hey, let's just get bigger, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Did you at any point, did you have to close your doors for any certain period of time?
Yeah, we are actually still officially closed. They're probably going to roll us back to phase 2 in the state here, Massachusetts. But you know, we're going to open up to outdoor training, and people will wear the proper masking and gloves and goggles and things, like, just for safety's sake. Because nobody knows anything about this thing. This is a brand new. Everybody's worried about the zombie apocalypse. Oh, what would happen? Well, here we are. And we're in the middle of this very real and extremely dangerous situation. And as a martial artist and a self-defense practitioner, I have to approach it from a perspective of, look, let's say it's better safe than sorry.
True.
Let's not play games with this. And
what you've been experiencing? What has been your experience transmitting technique through Zoom? Have you seen students be able to get tangible results from the training doing it digitally?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say that the accuracy of explaining and delivery of technique is a lot sharper. When you're teaching in a classroom, as you guys know, a larger class of people, you're teaching to everybody, and then you go around and specifically correct individuals. Mm-hmm. With this type of training, we really had to focus in on what we would consider the basics of our taijutsu. And we would real good how to throw that good straight punch, how to cover really well. These type of things really were magnified on Zoom. So now we're seeing the students actually, you know, they're covering better, they're delivering better punches and kicks. So it's been very interesting.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, you know, when you think about it, when you're teaching to a camera, it's almost like you're teaching to one person, but that one person could have an innumerable amount of eyes. Mm-hmm. Right? So you're focused on one thing. Yeah, you can look around and see the other people that are participating, and maybe you're able to give some points here and there, but what you're really doing is, like, I'm teaching to one, so I'm going to give everything that I'm thinking of with this one move or technique or skill or thought process. But it's really like dozens of eyes are seeing it, and they're all just they're gonna take in, of course, what their minds are, prepared to hear.
Yes.
But it's interesting that because we become more focused as teachers teaching on Zoom, that we don't want to leave you can't leave anything out. Whereas when you're live with a group of students, you may see, one person do something, and you'll look at that one thing and say, okay, everybody, this is what you may encounter. And really what you're doing is helping that one person, but you're teaching that to everyone else. And maybe a couple that really aren't looking at it that way, so they may be, getting something that they may not have needed at the time. But with Zoom, it's like you have the opportunity to cover everything. You can blanket it all because you have to stay so detailed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we
So
teach
let's
in our To-Shin
go ahead, Hardy.
program, I was going to say, when we teach in To-Shin, we constantly I have to remind myself and our other instructors that brevity is our friend. We want to get up and show just enough to get everybody moving. But I found the same thing we were just talking about as we're teaching through Zoom. I feel compelled to dump every bit of detail that I have about it, because I don't know what level the person is in front of us. Do you think that it has changed the quantity versus quality ratio of what people are getting? I would say if I'm utilizing brevity and teaching in class, we may get more techniques done, but we may not go as deep into any one thing. But what I'm finding through Zoom is we're doing a really deep dive into less skills, like you said, more of the fundamentals and that sort of thing. Has that been, congruent with your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For instance, like today, our first class at 6:30, we call it Lead Jab Monday. So, people wanted to learn how to throw a good lead jab. So we've been working on that for a long time, getting that shoulder up and when you're hitting and, covering. Now, it's not part of the Ninpo Taijutsu, but it sure is part of our society. So being able to spend a lot of time showing somebody how to throw a lead jab, I think is absolutely essential to, it's a good starting point. And then off of that, you can go to the cross hook, things of that nature. So that first class is pretty much a boxing class. The rest are taijutsu classes, but that detail, that very specific detail of the lead jab, as you can't spend enough time on that to show somebody how to use that to either end the conflict or set up subsequent technique.
That's interesting that you picked that as like one of the fundamental to begin with. Do you do a reasonable amount of sort of boxing skills in your dojo to help people be an effective or a realistic attacker?
Absolutely. I think in the West, we deal a lot with boxers, I mean, everybody, right up from the beginning when you're a kid, they say, put your hands up and punch the person in the nose, right from that day, first day, right? And it was the first thing I learned from my father. He said, hey, if this guy's picking on you, just punch him in the nose. And it worked.
It's hard to beat.
Just punch him in the nose. I mean, I was 5, but,
you got to learn someday.
Man. But the ideas of adding boxing to the training allows us to be able to expand our taijutsu. A lot of people are fearful of boxing, but I think if it's taught safely, it can really benefit a taijutsu practitioner in the sense that you're not going to fight somebody who's going to throw a punch from East Cupcake. And you might get a really angry person. They might do that. But then again, most people have had some sort of experience throwing their hands in a straight fashion, whether it be a Wing Chun person or, anybody,
Is East Cupcake a suburb of Boston?
Yes. It's near Joe Robinson's barn.
We'll say we throw it from their back pocket. They reach in.
Yeah. Throw it from the back pocket.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in what other ways has your awareness of boxing and boxing skills, has it affected yours and your students' training in taijutsu?
I think one of the things that boxing has done for me was it allowed me to understand that first is that you can use a very few techniques and have a lot of variation in those techniques. And everything can change off of those very few techniques. And with that said, the taijutsu, when you go back and you look at your taijutsu, just doing a thrust with a sword, a ski, you know, you're going right at the person. Now, if you can accurately use a sword thrust straight at a person, or a lead jab, or a bow thrust, if you, bless you, if you can really do those efficiently, it's very hard to get out of the way of. Very hard to get out of the way of. And so, say if you're thrusting with the sword, because of the simplicity of it, the person's going to either block it or get out of the way one way or the other, or jump back, right? Or they'll jump on it and get stabbed. But the point I'm making is that the simplicity of the boxing made me very aware that we should look at martial arts from a very simplistic standpoint. But even though it can become a very complex issue, when Mr. Hayes talks about the different energies in the body, it can become very confusing when suddenly this simple technique doesn't work anymore. How do we adjust to be able to survive that?
So, Mr. Davis, I'm sorry, go ahead, Hardy.
I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but
No, you're good. You're great, man. This is awesome.
I'm excited to ask this question. Does your boxing like slip, does that influence your uki nagash sort of punch defense, or that if you were going to teach somebody how to deal with a punch coming in, does your boxing training play a role in that as well at Boston Martial Arts?
Absolutely, because one of the things that we have fire trucks going by the building here.
Welcome to Boston.
Yeah, right. I mean, city dojo, you know. One of the inherent problems in martial arts is that you don't get a chance to really get in there and mix it up. And boxing allows you to do that in one sense. But boxing also has its weakness too, in that it doesn't, well, we can talk about that later maybe, but to be able to get out of the way of an attack, but a true hard-hitting attack is real important. I mean, you don't want to get used to somebody. At first, you say, you have your hand way back here, put your hand in your back pocket, and you step through. Okay, here it comes. You're softballing it to the person. No offense to the softball professionals out there, because I've seen them pitch, but they're, yeah, I know. But you know, you have this big, long, lunging action coming at you, and that, okay, here it comes. If somebody who's never seen a punch, that's a great training tool, right? But and I'm going to contradict myself here. When somebody is highly charged and energized and angry, all that anger is out in front of them, and suddenly this fist that's coming out from your back pocket comes flying through that anger that's in front. You can get hit with that if you're not prepared for that. But for our training, it's a very safe way to be able to allow the student to have that energy coming at them, and also develops the eye to be able to see things, and the coordination to be able to escape right from the first day. I mean, when we first started the training group, a lot of the guys who are training with me now weren't there then. None of them were actually when I started this training. We had a group on the Charles River, and you know, we were swinging sticks and bats and all sorts of stuff at each other, and it's kind of risky actually. But
when was that?
God, a long time ago. I don't even remember at this point. The 80s.
Okay.
And I'll have to look at my notebook. It's probably written in there somewhere. But you know, the boxing training from junior high school and grade school really had developed my eye to a point where getting out of the way was really no problem. Really no problem. So I'd like the students to have that experience of coordinating their mind and their body and their eyes to be able to deal with these things that maybe they wouldn't normally deal with, you know. Mr. Hayes calls the lip splitter. Boy, those can be really humiliating.
Absolutely.
You know, and they may not kill you, but God, you get whacked in the face, and then emotionally, now you're caught in that emotional trap, and now you start doing the swim fighting. Suddenly your technique is gone. Yeah, well, I'm really mad at you. So that's what happened to all those years of martial arts.
Yeah, that's right.
So speaking of years of martial arts, you were saying you started boxing in junior high schools. Like, where did it go after that? And specifically, when did you wind up on the taijutsu train?
Well, in high school, and we were doing a combination, a little bit of kickboxing and boxing and hapkido in high school.
Okay.
And I was really fascinated with, I always thought fighting was just this thing where you grab somebody in a headlock and you sit on them and you bang their head on the ground,
It works.
And yeah, it works, and then you can punch them, and that would disrupt them, and then you get in a headlock and you slam them on the ground, and I thought, yeah, that's fighting. But then when I ran into the hapkido people, man, they would grab my limbs and twist and almost break my arms. I was like, God, and then they kicked me. It's so far, they were so far away. They do these like kicks. They turn their back on me. I go to grab them and I was getting kicked in the chest. I was just so frustrating. So then I'd run in to grab them. And next thing I know, I'm laying on the ground, my face being smashed into this mat. Felt like my arm was going to break. I was like, God, so I thought it would be kind of cool to train with these people for a little bit. And pretty impressive group of people. And then from that point, obviously I moved into more of a kickboxing arena and did a little bit of it. In the old days, they had this sort of tough man thing, not like what we see on TV, where it was almost like a carny guy. He'd drive around from town to town, and he'd somehow get sponsored by Budweiser. He'd have this ring being dragged behind his car or truck, and then he'd unfold this thing, and they put posters up all over town. Hey, come and try yourself out, try your manhood out here, and earn $25. It was kind of cool, but man, the characters that showed up for these things, man, you're like, wow, man, when'd you get out? I mean, it was very tough guys. And I remember taking part in a few of these and being really surprised at the skill that these individuals had. These were, and skill, I think more skill based on experience than actual spending time in a gym. A professional fighter, as we all know, is a whole nother level of fighting. I mean, they spend their entire day, they do 500 lead jabs on a heavy bag, 500 rear crosses. I mean, you're not going to get near somebody like that, and that's beyond the lip splitter, But these guys are just rough, tough, and they had their own techniques, I remember I was fighting this one guy, he had overalls on. Right.
That's how you know it's trouble.
Oh man, this guy was, nicest guy, but man, when he got in the ring, he was just nasty. I remember hitting this guy with a rear cross to the body, and it didn't do anything to him. I was like, oh God, what have I gotten myself into, and I remember side kicking him using my hapkido sidekick, boom, and he just grabbed my leg and kind of just fell on me. And God, man, but I squirreled out and got away from him, and I remember he did something. I think he spit at me or something, and it was pretty nasty. So I kicked him in the groin, and the guy threw me out of the thing and never allowed me to fight again. But what are you going to do? I didn't win the $25 that night, but $25 in the 80s went a long, I mean, 70s went a long way.
I believe it.
That's a lot of money.